Night rested upon Earth like a heavy, indifferent shroud, and among the stars something remained on watch. It was not merely the vast silence of the cosmos, nor an illusion forged by the limitations of the human mind. It was a presence, subtle, persistent, and, in some way, inevitable. For decades, signals had been directed toward us, but almost no one noticed. They blended with the background noise of the universe, disguised themselves as electromagnetic interference, concealed themselves within inexplicable distortions of Earth's magnetic field. What seemed like chance or natural imperfection might, in truth, have been the echo of something far greater. Veteran astronomers, accustomed to distinguishing ordinary phenomena from extraordinary events, reported variations in radio waves that did not conform to any known pattern. They were short, fragmented pulses, seeming to follow a rhythm of their own. For years, these anomalies were dismissed as technical errors. Yet as the records accumulated, a disturbing detail emerged. This was no random noise, but the trace of communication hidden beneath the surface of everyday frequencies. It was as if someone, or something, was deliberately embedding messages in the channels humanity used daily, intending to remain invisible. As debate grew, the once ridiculed hypothesis gained strength. What if they were already here? Not in the sense of an imminent arrival, as though humanity always expected an invasion from the skies, but in the sense of a patient infiltration, slow and organic. The very thought was terrifying. Beings disguised within the crowd, silent, watchful, waiting. And most disturbing of all, quietly shaping the course of civilization. For ordinary citizens, life went on as usual. Cars on the avenues, crowded markets, the endless flow of modern existence. Yet amid this routine, small anomalies appeared. Some reported persistent lights in the sky, moving with precision impossible to attribute to airplanes or satellites. Others swore they felt watched even in familiar places, as though an invisible gaze pierced through them. Official science rushed to provide explanations: drones, sensor errors, optical illusions. But a margin of doubt always remained, a margin that could not be erased. And that doubt grew. Perhaps they were not distant visitors waiting for the right moment to descend upon Earth. Perhaps they had never left. Perhaps they had been here from the beginning, hidden beneath the skin of normality. The silence of the cosmos might not signify absence at all, but rather a carefully distributed presence, adjusted to remain unnoticed until revelation became inevitable. The most unsettling truth was this: humanity could no longer be sure it was alone. The question was no longer when they would arrive, but how much of them was already here. While governments insisted on classifying the phenomena as mere atmospheric distortions or instrumental errors, a small yet determined group of independent astronomers devoted endless nights to analyzing the records. They were scientists accustomed to the solitude of observation, to the patience required for tracking celestial bodies, to the frustration of seeing discoveries ignored. But this time, something was different. There was a cadence, a cosmic pulse that fit no natural explanation. What disturbed them most was not the frequency itself, but its exact repetition in specific locations across Earth. It was as though an invisible metronome marked the rhythm of some hidden presence above us. It was not random, not chaotic. It was organized. When they cross-checked data from multiple observatories, the pattern became undeniable. The strongest pulses coincided with the densest concentrations of human life, megacities, capitals, industrial hubs. It was as though someone had deliberately selected humanity's greatest centers as anchor points. At first, they entertained the idea of advanced espionage. Perhaps the signals were secret military transmissions, hidden among civilian frequencies. But that hypothesis collapsed when they discovered the emissions were not of terrestrial origin. They came from outside, yet not from the deep void of interstellar space. The source always lingered in low Earth orbit, moving in perfect synchrony with artificial satellites. This led to an even more disturbing conclusion. Whatever was emitting those signals was not simply attempting to communicate. It was building a network, a mesh invisible to the human eye, feeding on the infrastructure we ourselves had created, embedding itself into the very arteries of our civilization. Among the scientists, a grim suspicion spread. Had something escaped the control of governments, or had governments known all along, choosing silence to avoid mass panic? The official refusal to acknowledge the data only deepened their unease. And so, a question took root. If the signals aligned with our population centers, what was their true purpose? Surveillance? Control? Or the beginning of something far greater, where humanity itself was no longer the subject, but the object of an invisible design? The more they studied, the more unavoidable the conclusion became. The real question was no longer, are we alone in the universe? But rather, have we ever truly been alone at all? The first visual evidence appeared discreetly, like unwanted noise in low-quality recordings. On surveillance cameras scattered across different cities, something strange emerged. Ordinary people crossed busy streets, boarded crowded buses, walked past brightly lit shop windows. But their reflections did not match. In store glass, in car mirrors, even in shallow puddles, their mirrored silhouettes seemed displaced, as though there was a delay between the physical body and the projected image. At first, it looked like technical failure. Many dismissed it as recording glitches, corrupted pixels, compression artifacts. Yet in certain footage, the discrepancies were too clear to ignore. Faces appeared blurred, expressions misaligned with the subject, movements in the reflection not mirrored by the body. It was as though the visible image was merely an unstable mask, a holographic projection struggling to remain coherent across all surfaces. These videos began circulating in obscure corners of the internet, dissected frame by skeptics, programmers, and conspiracy theorists. Curiously, they always vanished after a few days. Accounts were deleted, files corrupted, links erased. The official explanation was consistent: digital errors. But the insistence on erasing the footage only deepened suspicion. One case in particular spread widely. A security camera captured a young woman walking down a sidewalk, distracted by her phone. She passed a glowing storefront window. Yet in the glass, her reflection held nothing. No phone, no device. The reflection walked at her pace, but with arms swinging freely, eyes locked straight ahead. The footage went viral for a few hours before disappearing completely. Only anonymous backups survived on hidden servers. The question could no longer be dismissed. Who are these people? Were they truly human, or replacements wearing human form? And if replacements, where were the originals? Slowly, the idea took shape. Perhaps these were not humans altered or controlled, but simulations. Entities that occupied space, interacted seamlessly, but whose true nature could not anchor itself in physical reflection. From that moment on, daily life was tinged with suspicion. A stranger on the street, a colleague at work, anyone could be more than they appeared. And for the first time, humanity was forced to confront the most unsettling thought of all, that it might already be sharing the world with something that was not human. Fear stopped being mere speculation when doctors across different parts of the world began documenting cases that defied explanation. These were patients who appeared perfectly normal in daily life but who, under clinical examination, revealed biological patterns incompatible with the human species. There were reports of blood that shifted color under ultraviolet light, glowing faintly blue in ways no known compound could explain. Tissues that healed in hours rather than days. Cellular structures which, when analyzed under the microscope, revealed genetic chains duplicating in sequences utterly foreign to human DNA, following a logic as yet unreadable. And yet, these patients lived like anyone else. They went to work, did their shopping, raised children, paid bills. None displayed any obvious signs of illness or mutation. In fact, many appeared healthier, stronger, less vulnerable to disease. Doctors attempting to publish their findings quickly met with resistance. Research papers were denied without explanation. Laboratories that ran genetic tests suddenly faced unannounced audits. Entire research teams were pressured into silence. Officially, the anomalies didn't exist. For those unwilling to accept censorship, the inevitable conclusion was clear. These individuals were not entirely human. Hybrids, infiltrators, or something else. Entities hidden in plain sight, seamlessly folded into human society, indistinguishable except when scrutinized at the cellular level. What disturbed the medical community most was not only the anomalies themselves, but the seamlessness of adaptation. These different individuals displayed no confusion, no crisis of identity. They fit perfectly into everyday life. It was as though they had always been here, their presence concealed within humanity for longer than anyone dared to imagine. And so, one haunting question spread among researchers. Was humanity still a single species, or had it already been quietly transformed into something else? The weight of suspicion quickly reached the military. In classified operations, far from the eyes of the public, excavation teams uncovered something unexpected. Machines. Devices buried deep beneath the earth in abandoned installations, with designs unlike anything ever catalogued. They were not lost satellites, nor discarded prototypes. They were structures alive with power, pulsing faintly as though they had never been inactive. The machines defied comprehension. Surfaces of metal wrapped with root-like filaments. Cables that resembled veins more than wires. When approached with measurement equipment, the devices emitted unstable fields, disrupting radios, compasses, even the heartbeats of the soldiers themselves. The order was immediate, absolute silence. No reports leaked to the press, no images published. To the outside world, those operations never took place. But internally, the discoveries triggered alarm. The implication was unavoidable. If the machines were buried across different regions, they had been installed long ago. Perhaps before modern civilization even began. Speculation raged within the ranks. Some argued they were transmitters, antennas sending data beyond Earth. Others claimed they were receivers, pulling down instructions from somewhere in the void. But the most terrifying theory was that they were neither. Instead, they were nodes, cores of a network alive, an artificial organism expanding silently beneath our feet. And if that were true, then a darker possibility arose. Humanity might not truly control its own planet. Perhaps it never had. Perhaps Earth had always been part of someone else's architecture. And we were only now beginning to notice. Soon, the rumors spilled beyond the walls of science and the military. The public began to notice unsettling signs in daily life. People vanished without explanation. Neighbors who left for work and never returned, friends seen one day and seemingly erased the next. In some cases, the missing reappeared days later, physically identical, yet disturbingly different. Witnesses described individuals who looked exactly the same but moved differently. Their gestures felt mechanical, their gazes colder. They spoke as before, but their words carried no warmth, no emotional weight. Families swore their loved ones had been replaced by copies. If so, then where were the originals? This generated a quiet panic. Families began to distrust one another. Wives studied their husbands with suspicion. Parents wondered if their children were the same children who had gone to sleep the night before. On anonymous forums, stories multiplied of relatives who were no longer themselves. The line between paranoia and reality dissolved. If these were copies, who had made them? And if they were not copies but altered humans, what was happening during the time they disappeared? Was the infiltration a process of duplication, or a transformation too subtle for untrained eyes? The thought that took hold was the most disquieting of all. What if humanity was incapable of distinguishing itself from its invaders? What if the difference had already blurred beyond recognition? The turning point came with an intercepted transmission. It was not a voice, not a language, but a code. A sequence of frequencies modulated with eerie precision, like instructions relayed across the air. Analysts traced the origin and destination, uncovering a truth even more alarming. The messages did not vanish into deep space. They circled Earth. Their final destinations lay in orbit. Not long after, human-made satellites began to fail. First came intermittent blackouts, then complete silence. Yet the void was not empty. Their places were filled with signals of organic origin, pulses that did not correspond to any known machine. It was as if living entities had begun occupying the same orbits once reserved for satellites. Operators in space monitoring centers reported strange silhouettes crossing their screens. Not metallic spacecraft, but luminous structures, their shapes shifting like tissue under a microscope. Whatever they were taking control of the very networks upon which civilization depended: navigation, defense, communication. Governments responded swiftly, cloaking the discovery in secrecy. To the public, the failures were explained as technical glitches, orbital debris, malfunctions. But those on the inside knew. Humanity was no longer the sole custodian of its own sky. The concealment did not last. The changes became too visible to deny. Nights once empty and clear filled with strange auroras. Lights danced across the sky, geometric and deliberate, forming patterns that no natural phenomenon could explain. They were not the chaotic swirls of magnetic storms but ordered grids, luminous frameworks stretching across the heavens. In the cities, new silhouettes appeared on the horizon. Towers, translucent and colossal, became visible only under certain angles, as if vibrating on another frequency. They shimmered half-real, projections anchored to hidden structures. Yet their effects on the physical world were undeniable: displaced shadows, warped reflections, devices faltering in their presence. The comforting belief that Earth was merely being watched collapsed. Something deeper was happening. The planet was not an observation post, it was being integrated. Piece by piece, the familiar world was merging with something otherworldly, absorbed into a design too vast to comprehend. Meanwhile, scholars turned to the past. Ancient texts, carved symbols, myths that once seemed only metaphor began to acquire disturbing new meaning. Legends of gods descending from the skies, luminous beings granting knowledge, inexplicable miracles, all were re-examined under a new light. What if the gods of old had never been divine? What if they had been the same presence now unveiling itself? For centuries, humanity preserved fragmented accounts of encounters with visitors, not angels or spirits, but infiltrators guiding civilization in silence. From Sumerian tablets to medieval chronicles, the pattern echoed. Beings who arrived, offered gifts of wisdom, demanded obedience, then vanished without explanation. And now, with the resurgence of strange phenomena, those same patterns re-emerged. The unsettling possibility arose. Perhaps humanity had never truly walked alone. Perhaps every war, every leap forward, every collapse had been orchestrated. We were not the writers of history, but its subjects, manipulated within an experiment that spanned millennia. And then came the final revelation. The signals, the distorted reflections, the altered biology, the buried machines, the translucent towers. Every anomaly was part of the same design. They were not among us as invaders. They were here as architects. Earth was not merely a planet inhabited by humans. It was a living component of a larger organism, a cosmic structure expanding silently across the universe. The alien presence did not herald conquest. It was the continuation of a project begun long before humanity's first breath. The question was no longer, are they among us? But were we ever only human? The silence of the cosmos, long taken as absence, revealed itself as a mirror. Humanity discovered that it was never the center of existence but only a fragment of a universal mind, and that the awakening of this vast organism had only just begun.